everyone, I'm David Thompson, and this is Civil War Conversations, a new feature on the Civil War Monitor website where we interview prominent members of the Civil War community. And I'm joined today by Dr. Peter Carmichael, who is the Robert C. Fluhrer Professor of Civil War Studies at Gettysburg College, as well as the Director of the Civil War Institute, and finally, the author of The Last Generation, Young Virginians in Peace, War, and Reunion. So, Pete, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So obviously, we are now a little over a month away from the Civil War Institute, the annual week-long gathering in Gettysburg of Civil War lovers of all shapes and sizes. So why don't you give us a little bit of a sense about what we're dealing with this year?
Sure. I think for some of your readers, they should, and viewers, not just readers, readers and viewers, that this Civil War Institute has a long tradition, that it is a gathering of Civil War enthusiasts of varying interests. More than 300 people converge on Gettysburg, and we have a faculty that ranges anywhere from 15 to all the way up to 30 people. This year we're pushing 30 that do a range of programming from, of course, formal talks to what we call breakout sections, which are really discussion-based, to all kinds of field work. So we offer a range of ways for someone who has deep, abiding interest in Civil War, someone who's just getting started. And this year, our theme centers on the war in 1862. And of course, in a week, you can't hit every angle of the War of 1862, but our emphasis, because of our proximity to the Eastern Theater, focuses a great deal on Antietam and the revolutionary consequences of that battle as it relates to emancipation. So some of the speakers that we have coming this year, Harold Holzer, who is extraordinarily popular amongst especially the Lincoln crowd. He is doing the first talk, and it looks at the imagery of George B. McClellan and Robert E. Lee. If you haven't heard Holzer speak before, he's a real treat. He's just extraordinarily witty and very bright, and one of the leading Lincoln scholars. But one of the central things that we're doing at this year's conference is that we have a book of the conference. And it's not my book, it's Mark Grimsley's book, Hard Hand of War. Hard Hand of War is one of my all-time favorites. It is a book that explains that gradual shift from a war of conciliation to a, what some people will call a total war. I don't agree with that, and I don't think Mark does either. That book, Hard Hand of War, is something that all the attendees have been aware of. Hopefully they are doing their due diligence and being good students. They will have an opportunity, of course, to hear Mark speak about the book, and then we have an entire panel devoted to it. So the bottom line with the CWI conferences is that I like to think that if you'd like to hear formal talks and you like to sit back and just take things in, you'll get that opportunity. If you want to mix it up and you want small group learning environments, you get that as well. And then, of course, we head out to the battlefields. Tours to Fredericksburg, Antietam, 2nd Manassas, and then tours of Gettysburg of the battlefield as well.
Well, it sounds like quite a full plate for anyone who would be interested. Now, this year, the format's a little bit different, and you're shifting the dates around a little bit in terms of when things are starting and when things are ending. Is that right?
I did. We've moved the dates. We start on a Friday evening. It used to begin on a Sunday evening and then would run through the week. We've moved to a Friday evening for a variety of reasons. One of the main reasons is that we needed to move away from the 4th of July weekend, which was crowding up for a lot of people, especially people who have families that simply couldn't make it. Also starting on a Friday, which opens up our lectures, and then we have Saturday and Sunday of lectures as well. We now have an option for people to just do the lectures only. So again, it's trying to make this more accessible to folks who love the Civil War but can't devote an entire week to it. And of course, all of this has gone over extraordinarily well with folks. We have more than 300 people that have registered. I'm very pleased by that. And again, it gives people options, and at the same time, it shows what I think is a sensitivity to the fact that there are working people out there that have families, and 4th of July weekend is a time that you don't really want to put too many other of these kinds of events around. So I'm pleased by how things have turned out.
That's great. I know that for many, traveling on the 4th is not an enjoyable experience, so just avoiding that entirely is probably going to alleviate a lot of headaches.
It is, and it's certainly for us. One thing we have to remember is, again, that the conference, CWI, has been around for some time, and there are people who have been attending this conference who are very devoted to this conference. They've given themselves to it in volunteer work, and of course this change in dates, that is frustrating and disappointing to some, but I hope that people realize that we're all headed toward the same horizon here, and some of these changes need to be made for the long-term, really sort of viability of this conference, right? And the other thing, again, I think that, excuse me, I'm having in the midst of an allergy attack here.
Quite all right.
I think that, again, your viewers would be sort of interested in thinking about how people learn, how historical consciousness is shaped, but before that is really how do people learn. And when I grew up, it was you sit in a classroom and someone talks at you, you take your notes, and then you get an opportunity twice a semester to unleash all your knowledge on a blue book. That way of learning is done. It's over. And so the CWI conference has to also then offer a range of educational sort of outlets. We can't just have 300 people in a big lecture hall and hope that we will, over time, continue to replenish our ranks with new attendees. We've got to, as a field, not just CWI, always imagine, create new ways of engagement. Like what we're doing right now, of course, was unthinkable to even you and I, maybe even 5 years ago.
Right.
And so it's so balkanized now, how people engage the past. These conferences have to adjust to that. And I'm hoping that this will be the beginning of many innovations where we will have conversations with the attendees at CWI, not just that 1 week in June, but throughout the calendar year by doing stuff that what you're doing right now, which I think is great.
Wonderful. And kind of building off of that, 2013, not trying to get too far ahead, but 2013, obviously in Gettysburg, is going to be a very, very big year for you guys, and I know you've got some special things planned. So I was wondering if you wanted to share a little bit about that.
It is. The anniversary is looming on us already, and as you can imagine, it's 2013 is one of those years where civil historians feel they're needed and special. Everyone wants us to come and give a talk, which is great.
Yeah.
And so the consequence of that, though, is I needed to get out of the gate with the planning process now, and I did. And so we have a very good lineup for 2013, headlined by Gary Gallagher, Jeffrey Wirt will be speaking, Alan Gelzo will be speaking, Ed Barsh will come and do his tour, Mark Snell will be coming back. We have a range of people, but again, the formatting is very diverse. Lectures, discussion groups, our battlefield tours. We've changed them for Gettysburg just a little bit. One afternoon is going to be devoted to following an individual soldier across the battlefield, a soldier who has left a body of correspondence and letters. So the tour leader, of course, has complete discretion to pick a soldier that they want to follow. And the group of 30 to 40 people will have in the field the letters or the diary of that particular soldier. They will follow in the footsteps of that man and then get a sense of how those individual soldiers represented their experiences on the battlefield. So it is, as you can imagine, a very Gettysburg-centered event in 2013. I've got, I think, a first-rate lineup, and some other people are coming. Aaron Shandeen, Carrie Janey. In fact, I have the list right in front of me here. Jennifer Murray will be coming back. Scott Hartwig, Kit Masterson Brown, Carol Reardon. So it's a great lineup of veteran historians, as well as some of the younger historians. Right. And yeah, I'm quite pleased. Quite pleased.
Sounds like quite the lineup.
It is. And I should quickly add that we have two other conferences that we are doing in conjunction with Gettysburg National Park. And let me make that clear that our 2013 event is in conjunction, co-sponsored with the National Park. The two other conferences that we are doing with the National Park, one will take place in March, the other will take place probably in October. Both of those events will be open to the public. But let me just briefly say that the March 2013 conference, and then someone might say I have a proclivity to hyperbole here, but I'm going to say it. There has not been to date any academic popular conference like the one that we put together for March of 2013. We have more than 110 speakers who have agreed to come to Gettysburg. They will be speaking about a range of topics, but the point of intersection is between public history and academic history. And so we're looking at battlefield preservation, we're looking at issues of race, issues of gender, we're looking about the establishment of historical parks, we're looking at land rehabilitation, we're looking at how Civil War parks can be viable places of civic engagement during a time of war. The format, mostly working groups and panels. That's why we have so many speakers. And there has been nothing, again, to date, certainly nothing in this 150th, that has brought all those people who are all interested in Civil War history, but they go at it from different means, bringing them together in the same room. From this conference, we're hoping to produce a book. The book will be entitled The Future of Civil War History, looking beyond the 150th. I think that it is raising the big questions that many of us are already engaging during this time period, but of course it is going to be looking at some key things that we aren't looking at. And I say the main thing that we're avoiding in this 150th is, why are we not using Civil War battlefields to think about contemporary issues, society that is at war? Yeah. We are a nation at war. There are some profound and important moral and political questions that any people should be confronting when they are sending men and women off to fight and die for them. We are not using battlefields in that way. We're not using the 150th in that way. I'm hoping that this March conference will address that issue.
Well, it sounds like just a veritable who's who of Civil War folks, academics, public historians, and the like. And it sounds like something that many people will have to have circled on their calendars.
They will. We're hoping by the fall that we'll get some information out to the public as well. I mean, we're going to have to limit the number of people who can attend. We probably won't go over 350, but when you already have 120 people who are roughly going to be coming to speak, that cuts down on the number of participants. But like I said, I'm very excited about the potential of this conference and very enthusiastic about the possibility of a book coming out.
Absolutely. And kind of piggybacking off of that, just a little bit, obviously battlefield interpretation, public history is something that is very near and dear to you. You were on a panel in Milwaukee at the OAH last month to talk about this a little bit. Do you mind sharing with us a little bit kind of where you see the future of this battlefield interpretation going?
Yeah. Yes, I will, because I'm glad to have an opportunity, because some of my remarks from that conference were unfortunately some very minor points were extracted, and it really missed the thrust of the talk. And I'm happy to even talk about where there was a little bit of blowback from the presentation that I gave. Here's the thrust, and I think this is where what we need to be looking to the future for battlefield interpretation is not straying too far away from the battlefield. We keep saying beyond the battlefield. We should never say beyond the battlefield. In fact, what we should be thinking about is, how do we center an interpretive experience on the battlefield in such a way that we stay close to the ground, give people that story, that narrative they want, but how do we contextualize it while also thinking about what people want when they go to explore the past. And what they often want is a time for entertainment and a time for discovery. Those two elements are critical because it helps people become their own historians. So how do we then pull that off in a practical way by still not removing ourselves from the battlefield? And this was my idea. Instead of an app that essentially, and I love these apps, they're great, but hell, they basically do the same thing that a regular tour does with a tour guide, right? And in some ways they're not as effective because you don't have that give and take. Right. There still is an intellectual authority with an app. So let's break down that relationship. Let's create a gaming situation. So for example, we're going to follow Davis's brigade July 1st at Gettysburg. You start at Cashtown. You're the commander of Davis's brigade. The goal of this game is to maximize your command strength and to, of course, be effective on the battlefield. Someone would say, my God, Pete, you're going back to the battlefield. This is all tactics. It's all military history. Where's the context? Here's the context. You're standing at Cashtown. You've got your iPhone. Suddenly, you get a question. Two of your soldiers have come to you. They are asking for permission to go and forage. Do you give them permission or not to go do that? What are the consequences of that if you in fact say no? What are the consequences if you say yes? Now another issue comes. An officer comes and says, that his camp servant, his slave, had been mistreated by some of the enlisted men in the rank. You have options here. How do you rule? How do you judge that situation? Of course, what you're starting to do is you're getting people to see that these military command decisions don't happen in isolation. They're within a broader context. So you can even go after the battle. When the men suffered pretty significant losses, now you have to report back to your communities. That brigade had Mississippi and a North Carolina unit in it. Now, you're aware, again, through this gaming process, that there are men who are struggling to make sense of this battle, and their morale is pretty shaky. But you've got to now write and represent this experience back to the local papers. You now have options. What do you pick? And then, of course, there are consequences to that as well. So the point is that you give people an opportunity to get on that field, to do what they really want, and that is to have an imaginative experience that's connected to the ground. We obviously don't want them to go off in la-la land. You can give them questions that put them in control, but they are very much historically based.
No, and this sounds fantastic to me. You don't need to convince me, and I really like that idea, obviously, of realizing how much of this did not occur in a vacuum, and that you need to see the larger context with all of this.
But what we can't forget about visitors is they want entertainment. I mean, I know that's a painful thing for any historian to say, and a lot of people sort of shudder at that thought, but visitor studies have revealed that people come to historical sites or to other cultural institutions for relaxation and a break and escape. Now, again, why are the ghost tours so popular? Right. Well, you can poo-poo that all you want, but the fact remains, more people probably go on those ghost tours than they use battlefield guides here. Yeah. Now, I'm not trying to say that we should mimic what they do, but it should remind us that there is something creative and imaginative, that people want to feel the past. Yeah. And so I say, look, we can be in control of that. Give them that feel, that connection, that sense of going back in time, but you can do it by getting them to see that what happened here at Gettysburg was not an isolated event, that these command decisions, that they in fact are extraordinarily complicated, and they are part of a larger network that extends all the way back to the home front.
Yeah. No.
I don't know the first thing. It's a struggle for me to turn on Skype, as you can attest to. So, I mean, the technical components of this, of course, are beyond my abilities. But in terms of bringing the content together, I think that is something that, of course, we're all qualified to do. And again, the key is we're breaking that relationship down between me as the authority and the visitor taking it in. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily always a bad relationship. I'm just trying to create a different type of intellectual engagement.
And I think it's a conversation that certainly needs to be continued moving forward. But certainly a great thing that you are putting it out there. Just wanted to wrap up with you, kind of a question that we ask all of our, or we will be asking all of our interviewees. Favorite Civil War book, or a book that you've read recently that's just really grabbed a hold of you, made you reassess something with the war or otherwise?
The most important Civil War book I've read in the last 10 to 15 years, not getting enough play at all, Francis Clark, War Stories. Absolutely brilliant. If you want to understand why Northern soldiers, to the bitter end of the war, clung to a sentimental culture that many people, too many historians have said is artificial, that is contrived, she, in fact, restores how these men made meaning of suffering. And she does it in such a way that she makes a clear delineation between the Victorian world and the modern world that, of course, is unleashed with World War I. There is too much modernism, and when going back and looking at these soldiers, in which we conclude they're hiding things from us. They suffered so much, and they simply didn't want to reveal that to the people back home. They sanitized war. Certainly some of that happened. But this idea that Civil War soldiers are so badly in conflict and in turmoil, that's a post-Vietnam view of things, and it prevails way too much in the literature. And Francis Clark, she overturns that trend. I shouldn't say she overturns it. She, in fact, blunts that trend, and I think takes Union Civil War soldiers on a more in a way that's more deeply historical and on their terms than what we've seen in a long time. Francis Clark, War Stories, published by University of Chicago. It's a great book.
Well, thank you so much, Pete, for joining us. I appreciate it. I hope we can have you back at some point again, perhaps talking about some of your future work, maybe a new book coming down the pipeline at some point.
I just write blurbs now. I don't have time to write books. I've given up book writing. I just write blurbs. That's all I do. It's very gratifying and takes just an hour or so.
Well, thanks so much for being with us. As someone who's been to the CWI, and this will be my 8th year going, I can't say enough about it. To all you viewers out there, I highly, highly, highly recommend it.
Great. Well, I appreciate being on here. I love the Monitor. It's a great magazine. It's exactly what we've needed in the field, and this is just, I think, another important way that you're going to reach broader audiences. So I think it's fantastic what you're doing.